Well, it was a rough week for area schools as the number of teams alive in the playoffs was cut in half. We'll bring you all the latest on this week's Varsity 360 right now. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Varsity 360's Gridiron Report. Mark Coleman here with you to take a look at the week's top stories in Fredericksburg area high school football. And as always, I have one of my very favorite members of the FLS varsity team. He is a freelance star sports reporter. It is Mr. Nathan Warters. Nathan, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for having me.
We've dropped the T, Nathan. I just realized that, but Nathan just rolls off the tongue. It's a lot easier to say.
That's why I go by it, you know.
Yeah. Been doing well? Haven't seen you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, doing good.
Good?
Yeah.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back. Well, why don't we jump right into it? We had a number of area teams that were in action in round 2 for the area playoffs. And we'll start with the 6A, where Colonial Forge had to make a trip down south of Richmond to take on a Thomasdale team that gave them a pretty strong challenge here. Colonial Forge pulling off the 38-28 victory. Sounds like it was a big third quarter from Forge, as well as a stout defense that really saved the day for them. Yeah,
Forge went ahead 10-0 in the first quarter, and I think they knew that Thomasdale was a pretty prolific offense that was going to be able to come back. Thomasdale comes back and scores 13 there in the second quarter. But then, Forge puts it on them. Their offense is just rolling right now. They've got so many weapons, and things are going so well for them on offense, and that's what happened. That's what happened in this game. Big third quarter. Gary Jennings came up big, 2 touchdowns rushing, 2 touchdowns passing. Their rushing attack is working really well too. I mean, Ramon Miller, who's been a constant for them. I mean, they've really relied on him all year. A big game for him as well.
149 yards rushing for Miller. It sounded as though Jennings spent a lot more time at quarterback in this game than he has in previous games.
You can't really predict it with, and I think that's the way they like it. It's every week a team can kind of look at the film and go, okay, now he's the full-time quarterback, but then you see Jamal Brown come out and play a whole first quarter, and you never know. Right. So in this game, Gary played a lot. I think in the Riverbend game, Gary played most, if not every snap at quarterback, but next week he might be a wide receiver.
Might be split out.
That's what's so good. I mean, I was talking to one of the reporters at the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and he's like, well, "What can you tell me about their offense?" And I'm like, "They differ every week. They're multiple. They do so many different things, and that's what they like."
Right.
And that's their threat. Who knows who's going to get the ball? Who knows where Gary's going to be? And
right.
That's what makes them so good, I think.
A multiple option offense, but that defense certainly is also part of what makes them really strong. I mean, this is a talented Thomasdale offense. They have a very dynamic quarterback. They did give up 28 points, but they had this one handily, the game handily in place there in the fourth quarter, I felt.
Yeah, and I think you see where their pass rush is. They're really good at getting after the quarterback. But their skill, again, is their secondary. Most of their skills in their secondary, because you got Gary Jennings, you got Jamal Brown, you got those guys playing. They just have a lot of athletes. They just have a lot of playmakers. It sounded like they didn't make the same mistakes that they were making some of the earlier games, the penalties, the turnovers. It sounded like they were a little bit more crisp. It was a little bit smoother. When you get to the playoffs, a lot of times teams just kind of, this is, you know how to do it. These guys battle tested. So.
Sink or swim.
Yeah.
So Colonial Forge knocks off Thomasdale for the second postseason in a row. They move on. They've got a tough match next week against Oscar Smith. We'll be previewing next week's games later in this episode. Stepping down to the 5A, Massaponax took on Potomac, a battle of 2 Panthers. We were guaranteed to have a Panthers win this game. It was the Ponax Panthers that came away with a 42-6 victory. Nathan, Massaponax continues to roll here. Another good rushing night for their backfield.
I think what was most impressive about this one was how complete it was. They had some games during the regular season where it was kind of nip and tuck, close games, and they haven't had that in the playoffs. And I was talking to Coach Ludden, Eric Ludden, before the playoffs, and he mentioned the fact that, hey, this is a new season. We've got a new mentality. We're going at, and I really think that they've played some real complete games so far. I think the only real thing that you can kind of point at is they had a special teams miscue that that led to the touchdown. That's about it. I mean, they ran for a ton of yards, and it was kind of a standard win for Massaponax.
A very workmanlike type attitude. It seems to be what they at least portray on the outside. They talk about on their Twitter feed, at least keep chopping wood and just getting the work done. And they certainly had some kids that were able to do this against Potomac. Joey Bedman, 9 carries, 123 yards, and a touchdown. Tristan Medina, my goodness, he's got 15 touchdowns on the year now, I believe, after 3 on this night for Potomac. Those are both juniors there, so some important contributions from some underclassmen.
Well, I mean, remember we had them ranked pretty low in the preseason. We didn't know who these guys were,
right.
and now they're becoming such weekly names on this on this broadcast here that now we're kind of expecting really big things from them next year, and they're doing so well now. I mean, it's a different week, a different guy every week too. I mean, Medina, I was mentioning to you, I'd very rarely seen his name, and then I see that he's got 15 rushing touchdowns. I'm like, wow, they've just got so many different weapons, and now you see Gus Little, the linebacker who's going to Maryland. He's a defensive player. He's going to Maryland to play defense, and he's the tight end making these plays now too. So they've just got so many guys they can get involved in that offense, and it's working really well for them right now.
Well, it has so far. So Potomac goes to 12-0 on the season, but the competition continues to increase, as you would expect. They have an awfully tough game this coming week against Stonebridge. Again, we will get to that in just a moment, but for the time being, Massaponax with the 42-6 victory over Potomac. Meanwhile, in the 5A, Stonebridge took on North Stafford and took it to North Stafford. Stonebridge pulling away with a 44-29 victory in this one. Nathan, it sounds like the second quarter was probably the difference maker for this game.
Yeah, Stonebridge have kind of a misdirection offense. They run a lot. They ran for 273 yards in this game. Kind of busted out there in the second quarter. Took advantage of some turnovers, some costly penalties for North Stafford, and North Stafford 3 straight years in the state semifinals. That run comes to the end here in this game, but. Seeing this team and talking to Joe Mangano several times this year just about the youth and about the direction of the program, these guys are in really good position. Yeah. Malachi Harrison, their tailback, he's an underclassman. He'll be back next year, which is, a luxury they haven't really had in years past. They graduate these 1,000-yard tailbacks every year. So he sat out a little bit this year with a turf toe, came back healthy, had some impressive performances in the playoffs, another impressive performance here with 107 yards and a touchdown. Jimmy Edwards, their quarterback, really learned a lot in the battles there. I think this team is in good shape for next year. Just kind of a shame that they had so many injuries in the middle of the season where they couldn't gel completely together for this playoff run, but a good season nevertheless. Good
season. So North Stafford's season does end. They finished the year 6-6, but had a number of injuries that really cost them opportunities to be competitive there in the middle part of the season. Harrison was out for a while, and Nakeem Morton was out for a while.
Cameron Myers, their lineman,
yeah.
He had multiple injuries. They just, it seemed like all the way down the list you could pick a guy who missed some time this year, and you can't. It's hard to win games when you're missing starters like that.
Absolutely. And then once they come back, as you mentioned, it's difficult for them to gel back together.
Yeah.
You can't just put together a bunch of kids and throw them out on the field and expect them to be able to operate as a team. I should mention here that Colin Buckley, standout running back for Stonebridge, 25 carries, 201 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing for Stonebridge. So they will move on. Meanwhile, North Stafford's season will end. They finish successful season, 6-6 on the year. We had a couple of area teams that were alive in Division 4. Cortland, one of those. They took a long trip down to Danville to take on GW Danville. Nathan, this is your old stomping grounds, I know, old home week for you. A tale of 2 halves, though. Danville getting out to the quick 29, well, they scored 29 points the first half and then didn't score in the second half. Cortland tried to mount the comeback. They fall just short, losing this one 29-26.
Yeah, just Cortland just got off to a really slow start, and just kind of for comparison's sake, GW was just super aggressive early. I mean, it was big play after big play after big play, and it took a minute or two for Cortland to kind of figure out defensively that they kind of needed to pick up the pace a little bit. 29-6, I believe, was the halftime score. Might have been 29-7. Cortland goes into halftime, kind of talk it out, kind of figure out what's going on, come out and the second half was as dominant as you can be as a football team. I mean, they held GW to less than 50 yards. I think GW ran 15 plays in 4 possessions.
Wow.
Cortland just it just ran out of time there at the end. Attempted a pass there, try to kind of make a home run play there, and threw an interception there late and couldn't complete the comeback there. But a real valiant effort by them to get in that position where they were only 3 points down with 2 minutes to go.
Yeah. Heartbreaking loss, I'm sure, for the Cougars. They did have some impressive running statistics, as we have come to expect, at least from this team. Victor Green led the way, 18 carries, 122 yards, and a touchdown rushing. George Cheatham, 20 carries for 117 yards. Anton Jenkins added 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. But 29-26, just not quite enough. And that, let's say, controversial decisions about play calling there at the end, but Coach Hall rolling the dice, taking those chances, taking the risks, high risk, high reward type play, and
I think
comes up in on the short end of the stick there.
I think at that point, you could make a case for the home run play just because the time was running down, and when you run the ball as much as they do, a couple stops, timeouts become a factor. So I think JC just kind of wanted to take a shot there. The third string quarterback was in there because the first string QB got hurt, and Jabari Allen, their other quarterback, was playing wide receiver. He was actually the target on the play there. It's tough. When the time is running down like that, sometimes you do have to, from my experience playing John Madden football, sometimes you got to take the risk. Not trying to trivialize it, but when you're playing football like that, and you're playing a game where very exciting, the ebbs and flows kind of come into play. You really want to end it right there, and I think that's what they wanted to do, and it just didn't work for them.
Well, and I can understand the desire to break tendencies.
Yeah.
You figure that GW probably was expecting the run. It didn't work out, but if it had, it would have been a brilliant call.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking, but unfortunately for most of the teams, for the vast majority of the teams, they're going to end their year with a loss, particularly in the postseason. Not too many teams get to finish as champions. So Cortland finishes their year at 10-2. It was still a successful season for the Cougars. I don't think quite what they were hoping, not where they had their sights set, but still a successful season nonetheless.
Yeah, and to make one point, Victor Green, who's got a scholarship offer from Virginia Tech, monster game on defense. I didn't have the defensive stats. It's so hard to keep the stats on defense when you're standing on the sidelines freezing. He had a ton of tackles, and then there was a couple plays where he just kind of willed his way down the field. That was a 4th and 5 that he ran 17 yards, was dragging guys down the field. He had an exceptional game. George Cheatham had a big game. Jenkins had 2 big touchdown runs, and he got hurt late in the game. I wasn't quite sure the extent of his injury, but all 3 of those guys were real tough. Green and Cheatham are back next year, so they've got guys coming back, and I think they're going to be in the same position next year where they're going to try to make a run like this into the playoffs.
Certainly have to believe so. So congratulations to Cortland on their season. Sticking in 4A, Eastern View took on a very challenging Jefferson Forest team we didn't know a whole lot about. They were undefeated on the season. Eastern View was in a very high-scoring matchup here against Jefferson Forest. Forest coming away with the 63-55 victory. I believe actually I saw a tweet by FLS Varsity that this was the highest-scoring game that an area team was involved with all time. 118 points. So,
beating a game I covered back in 2001, I believe. Torrey Smith was a part of a Stafford team that played in triple overtime against Albemarle. This game topped that. JF with 400 yards rushing their wishbone attack.
0 yards passing.
0 yards passing.
63 points scored, no yards passing.
I'm jealous that Justin Rice got to cover this. It just seemed like a really exciting game, a lot of scoring back and forth. Really impressive that Eastern View was able to pull off what they did passing the football. Kendrick QB, their leading rusher, he had 77 yards rushing, but he had 209 yards receiving, so a big game by him. I think it was a couple special teams plays late that kind of dictated the way the final score went. But good effort by Eastern View, and sometimes the tough luck there at the end kind of does it for you. So sounded like it was a lot of back and forth in this game. Josh Stallings,
a bit surprisingly, was the leading rusher for Eastern View, 26 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. He completed 17 of 21 pass attempts, which is a pretty phenomenal completion percentage there. 379 yards passing for Stallings and 5 touchdowns. Of course, you're going to have some big statistics to put up 55 points. 55 points in a losing effort. Certainly nothing to hang your head here about. The Cyclones fall to Jefferson Forest by a final score of 63-55. Eastern View finishes their season at 10-2, and they've got some good talent coming back. I think that the Cyclones certainly are poised to improve on their performance next season already.
Absolutely, and I mean, they had so many weapons that I think this is a team that could be back here, same spot next year.
Taking a look now at Division III, James Monroe took on John Champy, the Yellow Jackets, with another impressive defensive performance, and they come away with the 23-7 victory. Nathan, the JM defense, how about that?
Yeah, 10 minutes away from their second shutout in the playoffs. I really think this unit is really gelling and coming together at the right time. Vincent Ura came up with a big play there at the end, an interception to save another possible score there. Defensively, if you want one unit to be really on top of its game coming into the playoffs, you want your defense to be playing well. And James Monroe has a ton of offensive weapons, led by quarterback Jay Scroggins. They can get the job done on offense, and as long as that defense is doing what it's doing, they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. They didn't need a whole lot of offense in this one. Scroggins led the team for both rushing and passing, and actually had more rushing yards than he did passing. But it was enough. You win and you move on. That's the key. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Coach Survey is going to be happy with that.
And I think it helps when early in the game your quarterback runs 76 yards for a touchdown, and then your defense is playing lights out. You don't really need to.
Get the air of the ball, and it was a cold night.
You got to play smart football and make sure if your defense is playing that well, let them hold the other team and just kind of play your game. You don't have to be aggressive, and we know Scroggins is capable of putting up big numbers. We know Vincent Ura is capable of putting up big numbers. Keyshawn Johnson, their wide receiver, they have a ton of guys that can put up big numbers. They didn't need it in this game, so they saved it up for next week.
Save it up, yeah. They will go on the road next week. We'll talk about that again here in just a bit. But an interesting stat here, and it's you have these. So James Monroe, the current senior class, the 4 seasons that they have been there, and recognizing that not many of them probably played when they were freshmen, but over the 4 years that they have been at that school, they have played a game in every week that they possibly could have played. They made the state championship the last 3 years, and they continue here, and they're 12-3 now over that stretch. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty impressive record. So James Monroe, the Yellow Jackets, with the 23-7 victory over John Champy, and they move on. Let's take a look now at Division I. Washington and Lee took on a Perry McCluer team that ended up having an awfully impressive running attack. Perry McCluer coming away with the 48-28 victory over W&L. Leading the way for Perry McCluer, Raheem Dawson, 24 carries, 254 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground. Logan Author, meanwhile, 15 carries, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing. That's 6 touchdowns and about 400 and something yards rushing for 2 players. That typically is going to be a good indicator of a win when you're looking at those kinds of stats and things, Nathan. You agree there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always try to provide this, really deep insight into these games.
That's like sabermetric type stuff with the baseball stats. The W&L's played. They've had that offense, running wild week to week, and you get to the playoffs. These teams that are so used to running so much, you kind of run into these teams that do it just as well as you do or better, and it just seems like. Undefeated Perry McCluer, they just seem like they have more weapons than a lot of people can really account for, and that was certainly the case when you have a guy rush for 254 and 4 touchdowns. Jarrett Samil had a really good effort, was just shy of 200 yards rushing, had 2 touchdowns receiving and a touchdown rushing. Big game by him, but just not enough.
Not enough. So Washington and Lee ends their season 9-3, a successful season as well. Meanwhile, Colonial Beach was in action. They took on Surrey, and the Beach coming away with a 22-6 victory. Some new names here as well for Colonial Beach. The Drifters' Andre Turner with 21 carries for 159 yards rushing. Nick Graves with 96 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. The Drifters putting some things together here. That's an impressive team.
Yeah, a lot has been made of their short bench, but what they do have has been so impressive. And these guys have been really good. And like you said, they kind of remind me of Massaponax. Every week you kind of look at the box score and you go, oh, that's a new guy running for 150 or 200, and they just have a lot of guys that are capable of making plays, particularly running the football. And the playoff time when you're holding teams to less than a touchdown, their defense seems to be playing pretty well at this point now too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Colonial Beach moves to 10-2 on the year. They've got a rematch coming up against Essex next week, so we will preview that in just a moment. Time now to preview round 3 for area teams in high school football playoffs. We will jump back up to the 6A South, where Colonial Forge will take on an Oscar Smith team that ended their year last year, and you reported on this game, Nathan.
Yeah, that was the Mud Bowl. They played in probably the worst conditions I've ever seen a football game played in, and kept Oscar Smith close. They didn't have the power element that Oscar Smith had last year, and I think that really helped them evolve a little bit offensively this year, Colonial Forge I'm speaking of, because Ramon Miller this year has been a workhorse, and it seems like they have that power element now where if they just need their offensive line to pave the way and let open holes for their tailback, they can do that. And they also have all these speedsters and guys like Gary Jennings that can make plays as well. But I'm really interested to see how this game goes because Forge is on a roll at this point, and I really feel like this is when they take it to the next step and kind of really see where they are. They're capable of really competing in this football game, and I'm really interested to see how they come out and play.
So a matchup of two teams that are both on rolls, honestly. So Forge has now won 8 games in a row. Meanwhile, Oscar Smith has won 11 games in a row. Their opening week, they lost to a very strong Booker T. Washington school from Miami, Florida.
On ESPN.
On ESPNU.
Yeah.
They're the defending national champions or something like that. So Oscar Smith has won 11 in a row since then. It's a matchup of 2 very dynamic players as well. So Gary Jennings for Colonial Forge, Deshaun McCleese for Oscar Smith. He had 5 touchdowns rushing, 232 yards in last week's win for Smith over Frank Cox. Something's going to have to give here.
Yeah, and McCleese was their offense last year against Forge. I mean, he was the guy that Oscar Smith really relied on. He had 200 yards in that game. Playing run defense, obviously, I mean that's a no-brainer. You've got to stop the run. You got to hold them in that regard. It's gonna be tough for Oscar Smith. They have a lot of weapons. They have a lot of skill guys. Obviously, they're 11-1, and they have all these kids that are going D1. They also have Josh Sweat, the #1 player in the country, who's not playing right now because of an injury. But how do they defend Gary Jennings? What do you do? Because Gary Jennings, where does he start? Where does he start? Does he start at quarterback? Does he start at wide receiver? It's really going to be a nice little chess match to watch. A lot of talent on the field. A lot of kids you're going to see at the college level next year, major college level next year.
Yes.
So a real fun matchup, I would say.
So the game is going to be out in the Newport News area. So the weather may not be as much of a factor. I'm not even going to try to be the meteorologist any longer. But so this is a Friday game, I believe. Weather was certainly a factor last year. We'll have to see this week.
Yeah, weather seems to play a factor more in the playoffs, obviously, because you're kind of getting to the snow and you're getting to the real frigid cold temperatures and stuff like that. So it could play a factor, but I think that Forge is more equipped this year to play in that because of what they experienced last year. So
yeah. How about real quickly on the other half of that division? So James River will be taking on Ocean Lakes, an undefeated Ocean Lakes team. James River was the number 8 seed in this bracket. They've got upsets of Hilton, the number 1 seed, and then Cosby last week, the number 5 seed. They're now 8-4. They entered this one 6-4. James River pulling off a couple of upsets there. So that'd be an interesting game. Although Ocean Lakes certainly looks like they've got the inside track to win that one. Moving to the 5A North now, Massaponax will take on a very strong and rich tradition Stonebridge team. This game will be played at Ponax. Stonebridge holds the edge 3-0 all time against Ponax in head-to-head matches, including, I guess, the last meeting was in 2009, a 23-20 victory. That was in the state semifinals. This Ponax team, that 2009, that was 5 years ago. These different kids on both sides. Ponax they're 12-0 now. The defense is looking they're getting together. The offense is clicking. This should be an interesting game to watch.
09, that was another game that was played in a mud bowl. I do believe that Massaponax called for a change of venue before that game because it was snowing. There was snow on the field. It was kind of crazy. Stonebridge, North Stafford gave Stonebridge a little bit of a challenge there. I mean, other than that second quarter in that game last week, I don't know. I don't know if Stonebridge is the world beater that they have been in years past. Maybe they are, but I think Massaponax being at home, playing as successfully as they have in recent weeks, I think this is a game they could definitely come out and I know they're going to be motivated. They've got history to kind of avenge. So I think they're going to be really amped up and ready to go.
Yeah. Potomac certainly seems to have the mentality for it. Stonebridge, though, has the pedigree, I suppose. So the school opened in 2000. They started a 13-year consecutive postseason appearance string in 2002. So they didn't make the playoffs their first year, 2000 or 2001. They've made the playoffs every year since. Their combined record since 2002, including playoffs, 152-21. 152-21. Strong Stonebridge team, to say the least. Potomac undefeated this season. They were 10-0 last year. They know a thing or two about winning games as well. So
yeah, I was going to say let's go back and look at them since their start, or at least since Coach Ludden's gotten there, and see how many games they've won. They've had a run there as well, and I think it's two real tradition-rich programs they're facing off. A real cool matchup.
I have that number for you here, Nathan. Thanks for teeing that one up for me. So since their playoff run, their current playoff run, which started in 2009. They are now 50-11, at least in the regular season. I don't have the postseason stats, but in the regular season, 49-11, excuse me, in the regular season.
Very impressive.
So a couple teams that certainly know something about winning. Speaking of a team that knows something about winning, James Monroe in the 3A East, they will be taking on a Loudoun Valley team going on the road. Loudoun Valley 9-3, but James Monroe no longer gets the benefit of the Maury magic. Kind of like this matchup, though. This seems to be setting up fairly nicely for JM, it appears.
Yeah, you have to think about that road factor, though. I think last year they really kind of set the mold in terms of how to perform on the road. I mean, it was week after week after week they were on the road playing in the playoffs, and they won week after week after week. A lot of those guys from last year's team, they're in big roles this year. I think these guys know what it takes to win on the road. With the way that defense is playing, I think even on the road, this JM team can do some damage. So I think they're kind of primed there. I mean, the next week it could be a Lafayette matchup maybe, and that was a big game last year. So some interesting matchups, some interesting road trips for JM, but they're battle tested. They've done it before. Certainly,
Coach Survey, I feel certain, is not going to have this team looking ahead past the Loudoun Valley team. Just looking at some common opponents here, so JM beat John Champy this past week in the playoffs. Loudoun Valley matched up against John Champy in Week 6 and edged out a 39-33 victory. Not a whole lot that you can read into that, but you got to start somewhere, right? So some interesting matchups there. Meanwhile, in the 1A, Colonial Beach will have a rematch against Essex, two teams that are 10-2. Essex will be the home team in this one, which was exactly the case on October 17th when the two teams met. Colonial Beach gave Essex a battle there. The Trojans coming out with a 28-20 victory. You got to believe that the Drifters learned a thing or two about that rematch. I worry about trying to beat a strong team twice in a season, and I suspect that Essex has got some concerns here.
Yeah, and if you're a team that's going to win a championship, I mean, you go back and you look at some of the runs that some of these teams make. This is a very common thing. You play a team twice. Sometimes, I'm thinking back. North Stafford last year, they lost at home. They lost to Massaponax in the regular season, and they beat them in the playoffs. A lot of times, I was talking to Coach Mangano about that a couple weeks ago. A lot of times, you have more stuff you can learn from in those opening games, those first games, and you kind of build on it. And like you said, I mean, you kind of figure out what you did wrong. You kind of come up with a game plan that works this time around. And obviously, Essex is going to do the same thing, but they didn't lose the ball game, so they don't have as much to learn from. So
Coach Mangano was here a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and he said something interesting. I'd never really heard it put this way before. He says that you're a better coach when you lose. You learn more about what you did when you lose than when you win.
Because you become more critical.
Certainly.
So, a close game. Both teams do so many different things well. I think we're going to see another close ball game.
I suspect you're probably right there. It should be some exciting games around the area for round 3 in the football playoffs. Certainly hope that you're able to go out and catch your favorite team in action, or at least a good game. There's certainly a number of good matchups that we'll see. This is also Thanksgiving week. I hope that you enjoy some time to pause and reflect and give thanks for a great number of things that we can certainly be thankful for: the air we breathe, the country we live in, the opportunity to see some good high school football, whatever it is. Hope that you're able to enjoy some good food and some good friends and family. And I certainly wish you and yours the very happiest of Thanksgiving. Appreciate that you spent some time with us here this week. I always enjoy spending time with my good buddy from the FLS varsity team, Nathan Warters. Nathan, thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
It's always fun. It's always fun.
Hey, check out our paper on Thursday. We had our Lancey's Awards. It's our superlatives for high school football. So
yeah.
If you want to see some interesting, kind of some fun things, that's going to be in the Freelance Star on Thanksgiving Day.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't have any insight into what you have there, so I always I'm curious to see the crazy
we welcome insight.
categories.
If you want to give me some, yeah.
Well, if you're looking for the best high school football show host, I probably could recommend someone. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe might be a little bit late for that.
I don't want to ask you who your favorite co-host is.
Yeah, that might be a little bit awkward. It's him. Well, certainly appreciate your time. Hope that you catch a great football game this weekend. Check back with us next week as we recap Week 3 and preview Week 4 in Fredericksburg area high school football for the wonderful folks from the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, the mighty V2SN. My name is Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.